Coming up on Big Ten today, an action-packed weekend of conference hoops. Trent Meacham joins me to add his perspective to all of the action. Shane Sparks drops by. He will fill us in on all the wrestling drama from the conference over the last few days. Penn State rolls, plus an upset to fill you in on. And our big Impact Pioneers series focusing in on the fascinating life of Len Elmore, a truly amazing career that has spanned from the court to the courtroom. On Big Ten today, now. Welcome in. It is Big Ten today. It is truly great to have you with us on this Monday. We are presented by CDW. What a weekend in the Big Ten. 18 teams in the conference. All 18 of them played a men's basketball game from Friday through Sunday. We got tons of results to catch you up on, and who better to do it than our friend Trent Meacham. Hello, Trent.
Teams played, and we're getting there, but I think it's great. We still have 7 or 8 conference games left, these teams. So we've seen some teams go on some nice runs, but there's so much that's going to happen over the next month before we get into the Big Ten tournament. I'm excited for it.
No doubt, including the conference race, and there is certainly some drama at the top. Let's start in East Lansing, one of those teams battling for first in the Big Ten. It's our big story. Michigan State rallying from 14 down at halftime to top Oregon, 86-74 on Sunday. It was Tom Izzo's 353rd conference win as a Big Ten head coach. It tied him with former Indiana coach Bob Knight for the most ever. The Spartans scored 50 second-half points, held the Ducks to 6 second-half field goals. A great scene, particularly since it was the 25th anniversary of Izzo's 2000 national championship team, at least celebrating the anniversary of that team. They had a number of the former players back, including Jason Richardson, who saw his son have a fabulous outing. He was just tremendous in this one, Trent. Where do you want to start with Michigan State?
Well, let's start at what happened at halftime. I mean, they're down. The stage is set for this record, and you got this historic team back. And Tom Izzo doing what he does, getting those guys to flip the switch in the second half. And, you know, Mackey and Breslin Center, they got to be the 2 toughest places to play in the Big Ten right now. The 2 places where you feel like the crowd and the team really can pull on each other and create some momentum that it's hard to go against. And Oregon coming from the Pac-12, I don't know how much they've seen that in recent seasons. So Michigan State was fantastic that second half. They beat them up on the boards. They beat them up in the paint. Their brand of basketball. And then when you have a guy like Jace Richardson, no Jeremy Fears at the point, but you got a guy that can really score, go for 29. He's been incredibly efficient all season, Dave. I mean, his splits, he's almost 50, 40, 90 on the season, and incredibly efficient and effective in a big game where they needed him as much as ever. So what an individual performance, but this was their brand of basketball. So big win for the Spartans after a couple losses. You feel like they got that momentum back on their side.
It was their brand of basketball in the second half. The first half was all Oregon. I mean, the Ducks dropped 50 in the first half, and then Michigan State turns around and drops 50 in the second. As you said, Richardson was absolutely incredible. Those 29 points, just 4 shy of the Michigan State freshman record. What do you make of Oregon here? 5 straight losses for them. They shot 25% in the second half. And again, as you mentioned, look, this is a tough road environment. Certainly losing at Michigan State, no great shame in that. But the fact they've lost 5 in a row here now, this was a top 10 team earlier in the year. What's going on, Trent?
Well, I think they're struggling to find consistency from players. I mean, even in that game, you look at Shellstad showing what he can do, 18 in the first half, only 4 in the second half. Nate Biddle was better that first half, but ineffective in the second half. And across the board, this is a deep and experienced team, but they haven't had consistency. And the experience part is what is puzzling to me. I think they need to set the tone more so on the defensive side of the ball. I've always liked it this year when they've picked up full court. Extend that pressure, not necessarily to generate steals, but just to make the other team feel you. Use their depth to play 8, 9, 10 players, wear teams down over 40 minutes. They have not been able to do that. Now they have a couple home games coming up against Northwestern, against Rutgers. It's essential right now, Dave. They got to get back on track. Jackson Shelstad's their guy, but he's more of a scorer. So I think when they're distributing the ball as well, that full court defense, but got to move the ball better on offense, they're more effective.
Well, leading by 14 at the half and losing, I don't want to say it's unprecedented, but it's virtually unprecedented. I mean, under Dana Altman, they have been 74-1 when leading by 14 at the half. So it happened just one time before this, but they dropped that one, as you say. They head home for some big games. Spartans are 10-2. They're tied for first in the loss column in the Big Ten with Michigan and Purdue. Let's focus in on the Boilermakers. They got USC. Trojans still shorthanded without Desmond Claude, and man, Purdue is clicking on all cylinders, Trent. They were really impressive.
They are clicking, and I think that the pieces fit at Purdue maybe better than any team in the Big Ten. Obviously, that starts with Braden Smith, 13 assists that game. And it was interesting, everything that USC tried to throw at him. You don't see this much in the college game, but as he was bringing the ball over half court, USC was bringing 2 players up to him before there's a ball screen or anything. So they're trying to double him early, trap him off ball screens. They played some 2-3 zone. They were just trying to figure out something to slow Smith down, to slow TKR down, and had no solutions. And that's been pretty much the case for most teams going against Purdue. Just such a well-oiled machine, how they're playing. But then defensively, too, they're so solid. Besides Wesley Yates, who was exceptional, going for 30 points in that game, nobody else could get anything easy for USC.
Yeah, Yates was really unbelievable, particularly early on in this game. He was fabulous. But as you say, I mean, look, Desmond Claude is a huge part of what they do. I saw them in person Tuesday night, I guess it was, against Northwestern, which was the first game they were without him. Clark Slacker went off and nearly won them the game, but Claude so integral in terms of getting downhill for them. But yeah, TKR, 24-10, and maybe a point to prove. He was left off the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar top 10 list for the top 10 centers in the country, and he took out his frustration perhaps on the Trojans. Purdue trending towards a 2 seed now. USC heads home. They get Penn State and Minnesota. Let's talk about Maryland. They won for the 5th time in their last 6 games, a 9-point win at Rutgers. Derek Queen was just sensational. 29 points, 15 rebounds, and 5 assists. He is the first Big Ten player to do that in a conference game in at least 20 years. The Terps also one of those teams that it feels like is peaking here down the stretch into the final month or so of the season. What stood out to you about their win over a pretty good Scarlet Knights team?
Yeah, once again, Dave, this starting 5 for Maryland is so talented. And what makes them different is there's not one guy that you can relax on. Everybody is capable for going for 20-plus points. Those 3 guards hit 10 threes between the 3 of them. They can all get hot and bust open a game. Julian Reese was not as effective, but it didn't matter. When you have a guy like Derek Queen, I feel like Trevian Williams, we saw this player come through. He walked almost so Derek Queen could run and do what he's doing now. Kind of the evolution of a player like Trevian Williams that can handle it, that can pass it, that can face you up and be effective from the perimeter or the high post or do some work in the low post. I mean, incredible footwork, incredible instincts and feel for the game. Still a little bit inconsistent as a freshman, and also doesn't need to give you 20 every night because of his teammates and what they're capable of. But man, is he fun to watch. I mean, just one of the more unique players that we've seen in a long time, and he had his way against Rutgers. And if you're not physical with him, if you don't attack him on the defensive end, it's going to be a long night for you just because of his talent on that offensive side of the floor.
It's crazy how much better they are offensively than they were a year ago. They're 155th in the nation in offensive efficiency. They're 20th this year. Queen is a huge part of it. The guards are outstanding as well. They really hit home runs in the portal. What do you make of Rutgers? I mean, they were coming off that win over Illinois. You thought, man, now with Harper and Bailey, with Harper back, presumably at least healthy enough to be playing, some of the games that we had seen from Bailey particularly that game against Northwestern where he was just outstanding. You think, man, maybe they can make some sort of a late run here. But Bailey kind of disappeared in this game. What did you take from Rutgers' performance?
Well, I think Bailey was sick, it sounds like, and so that explains, his 4 points because he's been so good, and you just feel for them because they need both those guys to be healthy. And if they're healthy, and I'm going to expect that they will continue to be healthy, I would say watch out for Rutgers. They've had some nice wins lately. Those two guys got to be on their game, but I expect them to here the last month of the season. And if they are, they have every night out, I would say, the two most talented and maybe the best players on the court. So it's a tough one when one of your guys isn't full go, but hopefully they will moving forward. And if so, they're gonna be a handful. They got Iowa next, then they're going out to the West Coast. But assuming those guys are healthy, Dave, I think they're gonna hit a nice stride here to close out the season.
I'm really interested to watch them down the stretch. So that game was yesterday. As you may have heard, there was another sporting event yesterday, little operation called the Super Bowl. Philadelphia Eagles topping the Kansas City Chiefs 40-22. It happened to coincide with the birthdays of a couple Eagles stars and former Big Ten greats, Penn State's Saquon Barkley, Iowa's Cooper DeJean, who celebrated afterwards with some birthday cake. The now 28-year-old Barkley had a bit of a quiet game, but did set the NFL record for single-season rushing yards, including the playoffs. DeJean, who turned 22 yesterday, had a pick six, his first career interception. He was the first player in NFL history to score a Super Bowl touchdown on his birthday. Back on Big Ten today, some more scores from Saturday. Wisconsin got its third straight win, topping Iowa on the road. Illinois shot 63% in a 21-point win in Minnesota. UCLA pounded Penn State for its seventh straight win. And Indiana, on the day after the school announced that Mike Woodson will not return next season, fell to Michigan, a game the Hoosiers trailed by 18 before rallying to tie it.
We've dug a hole, and I've done a terrible job in really putting them in the best position possible to win, I think. And but emotionally, these kids have taken a beating a little bit, and it's my job to try to lift their spirits and keep them heading in the right direction, man, because it's still a lot of basketball left. 7 games is a lot of games, man. And we're still trying to play to stay in the Big Ten tournament and then see where that takes us. But we got to start winning some games here soon to do that.
Woodson did not address his decision to leave Indiana directly. Obviously, we hope that'll come at a later time. But, Trent, this is one of those games where it just felt like each team kind of does what it has been doing. Michigan figured out a way to win a close game, and Indiana, pretty game effort, but in the end falling short.
Well, Indiana can't dig themselves in those holes. So that's become a theme of getting down and you're at home, and it's kind of inexplainable. You'd like to see them come out with the energy that you need, like they did against Purdue, really. That's what they got to do every night. And they got some tough ones coming up, so we'll see how they respond and what's a really just unique position they find themselves in right now. And Dave, for Michigan, yeah, they didn't shoot the ball great. They turned it over. That's what they do, but they find ways to win. They were +8 in the paint. They were +6 from the free throw line, so they dominated on the inside. And then you have a guy like Danny Wolf, who's so gifted. 20 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists. There's so many things for them. Lod Golden was effective, and Trey Donaldson to round up that big three for Michigan. Those 3 guys were very good to give them a win on the road. I feel like this team is still not at their potential, and that's what I like moving forward. So we'll see if they can clean things up because they have everything you'd want in a basketball team.
They have a huge game coming up against Purdue on Tuesday. It's amazing. 4 straight wins, all of them by 4 points or fewer. They're the first Big Ten team to do that in conference play in at least 30 years. Wisconsin, they complete a season sweep of Iowa. They scored 116 points the first time they got together. It was far fewer in Iowa City on Saturday, but still, this is an impressive win. You go on the road and win in this league anywhere, it's a good win, particularly against the Hawks. What do you make of Wisconsin as they continue to play well?
Well, they are a well-rounded team, and you think they're playing Iowa. And how about this? They took 10 more threes than the Hawkeyes. So this is a Wisconsin team that they can space the floor, and they're playing faster than they ever have. And then just the two guards are really good. And Blackwell and Tanjay, combined went for 41 points. Those guys they just punish you. Getting to the basket, Tanjay to the free throw line, he was 9 for 10 from there. They're really tough to contain. And some teams have one guy like that, but they have two, just big physical guards. Then when they're knocking down threes, 12 made threes, they're so tough to stop. Iowa, they're searching. No Owen Freeman really hurts them. Peyton Sanford hasn't shot the ball great. He was 1 for 7 from 3 in that game. Look, they're going to have to make threes to win games with just their size and their inability to get stops on the defensive side of the floor.
Now you talk about hitting threes. Wisconsin, 33 made three-pointers in its 2 wins over Iowa this year. They made 31 two-pointers in those 2 games. While we're on the topic of three-pointers, Illinois' offensive approach has been a very interesting discussion, Trent. We talked about this a lot on Saturday. Going into Saturday, there was no team in a power conference that was attempting more three-pointers per game than the Fighting Illini, and they were shooting the lowest percentage from behind the arc of any team in the Big Ten in conference play. And lo and behold, Trent, they went inside against Minnesota and had an absolutely dominant effort. Imagine that.
Dave, I love the three ball as much as anybody. It's worth 50% more.
Yeah.
I love shooting it myself, but shot selection, basketball IQ, knowing what's a good shot, what's not a great shot, knowing what's a good shot, but you could get a better shot. All these things are so important, and you feel like they've just been so eager to get up a three at the first glimmer of opening. And so I love their approach of going to the basket, especially they're starting 2 bigs now. And you look at a guy like Will Riley and how effective he is going to the basket. And then what happens is you get the ball in the paint, you crash the glass. Well, all of a sudden now you get kickouts, you get offensive rebounds, kick it out for a three. Now those are better shots. You're stepping into them, you're not stepping back. And they go 9 for 16 from the three. So a really impressive performance. They had 50 points in the paint. And then you have the 3 foreigners. Riley with 27, 9, and 7. I mentioned how good he was. He's averaging 21 points per game over the last 4. But Kaspers Yakutunis got back on track. He had 24 points. And especially in the first half, Tomislav Ivicic was really good, very effective. He's a rim protector defensively and does so many things for them offensively. So we saw their potential. And kudos for them for finally going inside, and that's where they initiate their offense was very effective.
They shot 63%, their best in a conference road game since 2010. As you mentioned, they shot the three so well, too, because they shot half as many as they typically do. They shot 16. Normally, they shoot 31 on average coming in, and they were much better shots, to your point. And their upside, Trent, is so high. I mean, this is their 4th conference win by 20 or more points. Duke is the only other power conference team that has done that this year. So you see how good Illinois can be when they're at their best. Minnesota, meanwhile, losing for just the 3rd time in 7 games. Illini did a really nice job on Dawson Garcia, just 12 points for him. How about the hottest team in the league? The UCLA Bruins, 7 straight wins now for UCLA, 24-0 points off turnovers against Penn State. And I feel like that basically tells the story of the game. They locked down on the defensive end, and they essentially didn't turn it over at all themselves.
Yeah, they look really good. Maybe Mick Cronin knew what he was doing
Yes.
back or so when we all questioned him, and it seemed pretty bizarre. But they righted the ship. They've looked really good. The guards are playing better. Sebastian Mack's been more consistent. Sky Clark, who will be returning to Champaign here this week, he's been playing better. I thought Kobe Johnson was fantastic. Did it all. 15 points, 13 rebounds, 6 assists, 4 steals. I mean, talking about filling up the box score. And this is what we've seen Penn State do to other teams. Create some havoc, get up under teams. And what I love about UCLA is they don't gamble to get their steals. They get steals, as my old coach Bruce Weber used to say, when you're in the right position, they'll throw you the ball. We saw that happen there in one of those clips there to Kobe Johnson. They're so solid defensively, but they're also disruptive. They get up under you, the guards, and they rotate a lot of players. So defensively is where it starts, and they'll extend that pressure to the full court. But then they've been more consistent offensively with those guards. So they are looking very tough. They look like a Big Ten team. They're a gritty team. I love to see it.
Penn State on the other side, 9 losses in its last 10 games. Should mention they played without Yannick Niederhauser out with an injury, and it just seems like Ace Baldwin has not been himself, so things going a little bit south there for the Nittany Lions. Their West Coast swing continues tomorrow. It's part of a doubleheader on the Big Ten Network. We have Penn State at USC, followed by Northwestern and Oregon. All the fun starts with the tip-off show, 8:30 Eastern Time, only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Also part of that big Impact Pioneer class this year, Len Elmore, a great star at Maryland. You see his collegiate accomplishments here. First-round pick in both the ABA and NBA, 10 years in the league, and then became the only former NBA player ever to attend Harvard Law School. Incredibly distinguished career, including 30 years as America's best educated sportscaster. Currently the co-chair of the Full Night Commission for Intercollegiate Athletics, and he joins us now for our big interview. Len, I have known you in a professional capacity, I'd estimate, for probably about 25 years or so, and always have been struck by your incredible intellectual curiosity. So where did that come from?
Well, thanks, Dave. First of all, it's great to be with you. I guess the intellectual curiosity came probably from my parents, who both, really put education as a major priority. My mother was a salutatorian in her small high school in Louisiana, had a scholarship to an HBCU, Southern University, but couldn't attend because her family was so poor, went to New York to work and send money home. And my dad was a 10th grade dropout, a World War II veteran, but they both recognized what education could do for us and made that certainly a priority. And I think that, trying to live that legacy is something that I continue to do.
You grew up in New York City, Brooklyn, and then your family moved to Queens. We're talking about the 1960s. This is the height, obviously, of the fight for civil rights. To what extent were you aware of and maybe even involved in what was going on around you on that front?
Well, as an adolescent, certainly, and as a teenager, I was acutely aware of not only the civil rights movement, but, also the protests against the war in Vietnam. And, a lot of that colored my career aspirations. I had always wanted to be a lawyer. I used to watch Perry Mason on television. He was the voice for the voiceless, gave power to the powerless. And during that time of social and political upheaval, I thought that being a lawyer could certainly make a difference. I found out a little bit different later on, but nevertheless, I didn't lose that dream and continued, even though, as I say, basketball kind of got in the way.
Aside from Perry Mason, who were your heroes growing up, Len?
Well, I had a variety. First of all, the one who probably influenced me the most to try different things, to be more than just, one person to be pinned down as to being, just one-trick pony was Paul Robeson. I read about him in junior high school and recognized, he was a man who was the son of a formerly enslaved family that ultimately became the valedictorian at Rutgers, a Phi Beta Kappa. He was also a great athlete, All-American football player, played basketball, baseball, but also, was a political and social activist and, was a concert singer and actor. A literal Renaissance man. Here, a black man at the turn of the century, which was amazing to me and, really piqued my curiosity as to, how many things you could possibly do. I didn't necessarily want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none, but certainly I wanted to try enough things that would satisfy that curiosity that you mentioned.
Now, Robeson's biography is absolutely amazing, just a groundbreaking human being. I do want to ask you about basketball, at least a little bit. It's fascinating to me that you kind of stumbled into the sport, it seems like, Len. Tell me how that happened.
Well, I wasn't an interested basketball player. I love sports, but I was more of a baseball player and played a little football. And it wasn't until the ninth grade where a PE teacher in my junior high school saw me kind of goofing around with some of my classmates at a hoop. And, I kind of looked, I don't know if anybody ever recalls the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. At that time, I considered myself looking like Chief in that particular moment. But I was taller than everybody else. And, my teacher kind of played on my insecurity, asked me, don't you want to play a sport where people are closer to your size? And I said, sure. So he takes me down to a high school, a famous high school, Power Memorial Academy, known for someone a lot better, a lot more famous than I am. But they threw up the ball at half court. We went to the tip, and I had only been playing basketball a little bit, and everybody took off, and I'm still at half court wondering, how do you guys know which way to run? So, that was my introduction to the game. Ultimately, I had enough athleticism to develop some skills, and I guess you could say the rest was history.
Well, you talk about the guy a little more talented than you who had preceded you at Power Memorial. I think most basketball fans are probably aware. You were speaking of Lou Alcindor, who, of course, eventually changed his name to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and went on to have one of the greatest careers in the history of basketball. He preceded you at Power by, I believe, 5 years, so you guys did not overlap. But to what extent were you compared to him?
Well, honestly, they compared us the first day of practice, and I think the comparison stopped on the second day. No, people like to make that comparison. Obviously, I'm nowhere near where he was, but Kareem was an extraordinary person for me to try to emulate. Again, his many interests as well, certainly were impressive and certainly weren't lost on me. And I just tried to represent as well as he did to the extent that I could. But, he's always been a hero of mine.
So Kareem went west from Power Memorial, obviously out to UCLA. You went south. You went to the University of Maryland, which technically is south of the Mason-Dixon line. I know people in Maryland don't really think of it as the South per se, but give me a sense of what the racial climate was like on campus when you arrived at Maryland.
Well, when I got to the University of Maryland, one of the things that attracted me was the fact that there are a lot of Northeasterners from New York, New Jersey. And so, the campus itself didn't feel foreign. Certainly, you recognize the history. There were lunch counters in downtown College Park and other places that weren't even integrated just 5 years earlier than when I arrived in 1970. But the whole atmosphere was pretty welcoming. And I think Lefty Driesell, my coach, the late Lefty Driesell, had a lot to do with that with regard to how we were welcomed as players. Remember, when we got to Maryland, my sophomore year, my junior year, we had several African-American starters. I don't think any ACC team other than Maryland had more than one African-American starter, but we put 3 and sometimes 4 on the floor. Maryland basketball also had the first African-American assistant coach in George Raveling. So there were a lot of groundbreaking events that occurred at the University of Maryland. That's one of the big reasons why I chose that school. I was recruited by North Carolina, recruited by Duke, all great schools, but they were a little bit too far south for a young man from New York City in 1970. Campus was great, but I was worried about what would happen when I stepped off campus. That was a different story at the University of Maryland, in the shadows of our nation's capital, also between Baltimore and Washington, D.C., two metropolises. And I felt more comfortable coming from an urban setting like New York.
We had a brilliant career there at the University of Maryland, just fabulous. You ended up as a first-round pick in both the ABA and the NBA. Len, you started in the ABA and then finished your career in the NBA. Your basketball career kind of speaks for itself. So at the risk of not speaking about sports on a sports show, I want to ask you about a decision that you made at the end of your NBA career, and that was to apply to Harvard Law School. Tell me about that decision-making process, obviously tying back to some of the aspirations of your youth, and what made you decide that that was the route for you.
Well, I had recognized probably in my ninth year, my knees were hurting. I felt a lot of pain, and quite honestly, I wasn't getting the minutes when I was with the Knicks that I thought I should, even though I had a 2-year contract there. And so between the ninth and 10th year, I decided to take the preparation for the LSATs, aptitude test for law school. That summer, I took it and did reasonably well. And quite honestly, I thought it was time. I didn't know it would be that year or following year, but I applied to a number of law schools. But, if my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, challenged me and asked me, why don't you try and apply to the best? And I looked at her and said, I'm not sure I'm going to get in there. But I applied anyway. And here I am with the Knicks. We're playing the Celtics in the playoffs. And I get a letter in the mail. I thought it was the declination. In fact, it was my acceptance letter. Fortunately, we were in Boston, had a day off, so I took the T over to Cambridge, and it kind of helped me make a decision. Walked around campus, went to the library, the Langdale Library, and walked around a little bit. And finally, it just dawned on me. The light bulb came on, and I said, you know what, this is where I need to be. And so I did make the decision. I gave up that final year on my contract, and again, to the delight of my girlfriend, who ultimately became my wife, and to my parents and others, I decided to make a move.
It's just an amazing story. Your resume post NBA is incredible. So many accomplishments. Is there something that you're proudest of?
Well, I think probably the fact that, after graduating from law school, I became a prosecutor in my hometown in Brooklyn, New York, Kings County, and then thought that I worked for a very enlightened prosecutor, Elizabeth Holtzman, who, recognized it was more important to do justice rather than merely convict. And, that was probably my favorite job out of all the jobs that I've had. I've worked in the corporate setting with corporate firms. I've had my own sports management company, which is another area that I'm quite proud of. For 5 years, I represented some of the top basketball players and football players in during that particular time. So, I could recognize that those areas and giving back to my community, being able to do something for people that was positive and helped put people on the right track, certainly is something that I'm proud of. And going forward, I think that's the mantra. I stood on the shoulders of others, and hopefully I've set some kind of precedent where people can stand on my shoulders and achieve.
Well, kind of along those lines, I want to end with this, Len. I don't want to make this seem past tense. I mean, obviously you still have a career that you're in the midst of right now. You teach at Columbia. As I mentioned, you're an integral part of the Knight Commission. But all that being said, in the context specifically of Black history, how do you want to be thought of / remembered?
Wow. Someone who cared about community, someone who had doors open for him and continue to prop the door open and lend a hand.
Well, Len Elmore, that is well said. I think you have accomplished that, frankly, because I think that is how you're thought of right now. Again, so much basketball. We didn't even talk about 74, North Carolina State, Maryland. Maybe we do that another time. And obviously a tremendous career as a broadcaster. It has been a thrill for me to sit next to you in studios through the years, to share the microphone on game calls as well. You are a total class act and someone I'm proud to have called a colleague and a friend. Len, thanks so much for your time, and congratulations on this induction.
Thanks, Dave. It's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you very much.
We're going to talk wrestling next. Eventful weekend. Shane Sparks here to guide you through what you might have missed and his perspective straight ahead on Big Ten Today. Back on Big Ten Today, wrestling on Friday night, Iowa rallied to beat Nebraska 19-16 a match they trailed 16-9 heading into 197. It was the Hawks' 16th straight win over the Huskers. So Shane Sparks is here. Shane, is the bigger story here, is the bigger story that Iowa won, or is it how close Nebraska came to winning, something that you predicted might happen on this very desk on Friday?
These are two phenomenal teams. Iowa ranked third in the dual meet rankings, Nebraska coming in sixth. I said on Friday, Nebraska's path to victory, three big matches. 149 with Ridge Lovett and Kyle Parko, 174, Lenny Pinto and Patrick Kennedy, and then at 184 with Gabe Arnold of Iowa and Silas Allred of Nebraska. 149 pounds. That was a big match. Kyle Parko of Iowa beat Ridge Lovett. That was a top 5 match. 149 at the Big Ten tournament is going to be phenomenal because at 149, you had Kyle Parko of Iowa beat Ridge Lovett of Nebraska. Ridge Lovett of Nebraska beat Shane Van Ness of Penn State. Shane Van Ness of Penn State beat Kyle Parko of Iowa. So 149 is such a fun weight class, but that was a huge win.
Circle of defeat.
Yes, a huge win for Kyle Parko. And then at 174, Dave, the match of the year in the Big Ten, it was crazy. Lenny Pinto and Patrick Kennedy. Lenny Pinto goes up 10-1. 2 minutes into the first period, just like that, it's 10-9. These guys almost 20 points. You talk about exhausting the scoreboard. They exhausted the scoreboard. Kennedy rides in the entire second period. Ultimately, Kennedy's got riding time. It's essentially an 11-11 match. 10 seconds left. Looks like it's destined for sudden victory. Pinto puts Kennedy on his back, 3 takedown, 4 near fall. He gets the 18-11, I believe was the final score. Then you have Silas Allred who comes out. He was a Big Ten champion 2 years ago at 197. He beats Gabe Arnold in sudden victory. That was big. And as you said, they were up 16-9. And they have number 1 ranked Stephen Buchanan of Iowa. He was just chasing down points, looking to get that major. Once he had the major intact, he's looking to get that tech fall. And then late in the match, he gets the slap of the Resolite. That was a huge pin for Buchanan. Ben Keeter comes up at heavyweight, gets a major decision. That was a great dual meet. It's one of those dual meets, Dave, over the years working here at the Big Ten Network covering wrestling. Nebraska and Iowa, it just doesn't disappoint because they're always really good teams, handful of really good matches. That was a phenomenal dual meet, one of the best we've seen this season. And like I said before, 174, I applaud you, Lenny Pinto. I applaud you, Patrick Kennedy. Those two put on a show, a remarkable match.
Oh, it's amazing. The Huskers came as close as they did, although, again, as I said, you predicted they might, but they hadn't won in Iowa City since 1937, so it would have been quite momentous if they pulled it off. Okay, so let's talk about Penn State. They rallied, they wrestled, I should say, twice this weekend. They took on Michigan and Maryland. They won by a combined 74-10, including shutting out Michigan. A shutout.
And Michigan's a phenomenal program.
Right,
I mean, one of the best programs in the country in the last handful of years.
Program that's won a national championship in very recent memory.
Phenomenal team.
Yes, so this isn't some team that they just, paid their travel expenses to come and pound. Give me some perspective here on where Penn State is.
Well, they beat Michigan. They shut them out. Then they had a nice win against Maryland yesterday. The match of the night, one of the best matches of the entire weekend, was Josh Barr and Jacob Cardenas. So Josh Barr suffered his first college defeat in his career against Stephen Buchanan of Iowa, and then he comes back, got to have that short memory. This match was crazy. He needed a reversal to win it. This is in the tiebreakers. Cardenas had the riding time advantage. If he just gives up the escape, Cardenas is going to win the match. Inside of 5 seconds, Josh Barr gets a reversal to win it. That was an incredible match. He just found a way to get it done. And 197, again, in the Big Ten. I talked about 149. In the Big Ten, at 197, you got number 1 ranked Stephen Buchanan. You have Jacob Cardenas of Michigan. You got this phenomenal redshirt freshman in Josh Barr. I mean, these guys are just so darn good. It's a physical weight class. I mean, these are alpha dogs, Dave. These are men. These are dudes that are showing up and towing the line. It's going to be a fight.
Looking forward to the Big Ten tournament. It's going to be something else.
So good. So good.
So what about Ohio State? They lost to Minnesota, which was a little surprising, and then they won at Indiana. What do you make of the Buckeyes weekend, and particularly that win for the Gophers?
Minnesota has done a great job. Brandon Eggum has been great there. Of course, he's been there a while, replacing legendary coach Jay Robinson. In that dual meet, it began at 197 pounds. Isaiah Salazar in sudden victory gets a nice win. Gable Steveson, it's been all tech falls and falls. This was just a major decision over Nick Feldman, an All-American from Ohio State. So they're up 7-0. And then Ohio State, they win those middleweight classes. Jesse Mendez in a dogfight at 141 pounds, the reigning national champion against, I call him the Hurricane, Vance Varmbar. Mendez got it done, and then it came down to the end. Minnesota really controlled the second half. Carson Hartslaw won at 174, set the table for 184, and I like this, Dave. At 184, Max McAnally, who's been phenomenal for Minnesota, Ryder Rogoski from Ohio State. These two are a couple of Minnesota preps. They wrestled in a 2023 state championship match. Rogoski bumped up that year. McAnally won to win his fourth state title. They had to settle it in that dual meet with Minnesota and Ohio State. Major decision for Max McAnally, and Minnesota wins. Minnesota's been very good this season. They got one loss. They're 10-1 overall, one loss in the Big Ten. That was to Nebraska, first dual meet of the season in conference. They wrestle Iowa this weekend in a border battle. Great traditional programs. Can't wait to watch that one unfold.
Yeah, it's going to be a great weekend, right? I mean, Friday, you've got Iowa and Minnesota. You also have Penn State and Ohio State.
Yes.
All on the Big Ten Network. Yeah.
Can't wait, Dave. I can't wait. It's just, I mean, these are phenomenal teams. I mean, the Big Ten is just so good. I've said this to you before, Dave. Every year, it's like, I don't know if the Big Ten can get better because it's so good. Of course, they've won 17 straight team titles, NCAA championships. But the talent, the Big Ten doesn't rebuild, it reloads. And this has been, I think it's the best year from a depth standpoint in the Big Ten. Of course, Penn State, I mean, they got that gap. But when you look at Iowa, Ohio State, Minnesota, Nebraska, those teams, you kind of put them in a bucket, and on any given day, who knows what you're going to draw.
So you're saying you're not convinced that Iowa is clearly the second best team in the league?
I think, Dave, one thing that's interesting with wrestling, not to get too complicated here.
No, please
but
get complicated.
You have dual meet wrestling, and then you have tournament wrestling. It's different. I mean, to crown an NCAA championship, we'll do that in March in Philadelphia. Yeah. It's tournament scoring. Dual meet scoring is different.
Right.
So, I mean, I think Iowa, they have the inside track to second place.
Okay.
But if they so much as lose focus, it's all it takes. I mean, the margins are small. And I want to bring this up, too, real quick, Dave. Getting back to Penn State. And this is where the physicality of the sport and how difficult it is to stand atop the podium. Tyler Kasak of Penn State had the injury default. That was his first loss at 157. Tyler, wish you the best. Hope you heal up quickly. Love to see that Nittany Lion get back on the mat. He's one of my favorites. But it just reminded me yesterday watching him against Maryland that it's a physical sport, and just like that, your dreams can be gone.
Yeah, no, tenuous, no doubt, and I certainly echo those sentiments. We'll look forward to Friday in the Big Ten, another action-packed weekend. Get a little rest between now and then.
Love coming on, Dave. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Great to have you. Women's hoops ranked scores from the weekend. USC topping Ohio State. Bucks got swept on their West Coast trip. UCLA still perfect, 22nd straight win by a double-digit margin. They visit SC Thursday. Maryland got 36 from Kayleen Schmeichel, rallied from 15 down to top Washington. And Kim Barnes-Arico wins her 278th game at Michigan, most for either a men's or women's coach there as they upset Michigan State. A couple more men's scores from the weekend. Nebraska rallied from 8 down in the second half to win its fourth straight, topping Ohio State by 8. And Washington came back from 4 points down in the final 4 minutes to defeat Northwestern. The Cats now without Jalen Leach for the year, in addition to Brooks Barnheiser. Let's start as we welcome Trent back in with the Huskers. They had a 6-game skid, Trent. It felt like this was headed in the wrong direction. How has Nebraska turned it around?
Well, I've been so impressive with them on both sides of the floor. That second half, they showed that they're stingy on defense. They're great positioning on that side of the floor. And then offensively, the execution is nearly flawless. They have shot makers. Bryce Williams has elevated his game, 24 points, seemingly making all the right decisions and getting to the basket, making plays at such a high level. So they're playing great. They've turned around, got a big one against Maryland coming up.
Ohio State now heads home. They have 3 in a row at home: Washington, Michigan, and Northwestern. And speaking of Washington and Northwestern, Huskies overcoming turnover issues, beating the shorthanded Wildcats. What did you take from their win?
Well, Northwestern's going to fight. No Barnheiser, no Jalen Leach, no Coach Collins for much of that game. So they really fought, but Washington at home, they made the plays to win the game. Some big shots down the stretch. I think when you have a guy like DJ Davis making shots, he hit a big 3 there in the closing minutes. They need that. Great Ossober has been pretty consistent, playing the ball, playing well. Tyler Harris has played well. So they're a tough out at home, and that's a big win for them. They need every one of them.
They do indeed, as they look to fight their way into the Big Ten tournament. I mentioned we got a hoops doubleheader coming up on Tuesday. Trent making the drive up to hang out with us. Look forward to seeing you in the studio. Thanks so much for watching Big Ten Today.